Hey guys, this is Sports with Dylan. We are halfway through the NFL season, and yet 2 NFL coaches have already been fired. The second one was today. Frank Reich, the Colts' former head coach, was fired. If you told me before the NFL season that Frank Reich would be fired at the halfway point of the NFL season, I wouldn't know what to say. I would be shocked because he has a really good team and he seems like a pretty good coach. But that is exactly why he got fired. The fact that he has a really good team and yet he's done nothing with it. The whole team has been playing terribly this year. And I'm not going to blame that all on Frank Reich. I think Matt Ryan was a terrible acquisition. He has not had it. Looks like he's hit a wall. He ended up getting benched for Sam Ellinger. I made a video on it, which I'll leave a link to in the description. But, in short, they do not have a competent quarterback on their roster currently. Which means that the receivers have lower stats. And the offensive line is also playing terribly. They still have Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly, and yet both of them seem to have forgotten they are superstars in the NFL, which means that Jonathan Taylor, the running back, has not been nearly as productive as last year either, because the offensive line is not holding up for him. On the defensive end of things, it hasn't been as bad, but they have struggled with injuries from both DeForest Buckner and Shaquille Leonard. So, that hasn't been great for them. Plus, their safety unit has just been awful, especially after Khari Willis retired this past offseason. Before the NFL season, I thought the Colts were going to win the division. But that is not looking like that anymore, obviously. The Titans are easily playing the best in the division and should easily take that home. And the Jaguars might actually come in second at this rate. It's a close race between the two. But I think the Jaguars have played better to date than the Colts have. So the Colts will be competing for third in the division, which is not a stat you want to have when you have a roster with as many All-Pros as you do. They had the most Pro Bowlers last year out of any team, and yet they missed the playoffs. Now, the owner decided to blame that all on Carson Wentz and trade him away and get Matt Ryan. Turns out that was not the best idea, and I made a video about that, and I'll leave a link in the description. But they just gave away a quarterback that's average. I'm not going to call him superstar. He's fine, he's not bad, but he's not going to be amazing either. Meanwhile, Matt Ryan was supposed to be an upgrade, because he had been on a bad Falcons team. He must go to a good Colts team and play amazing, right? It just makes all the sense in the world. And yet, it seems like the 37-year-old quarterback has hit a wall, and that could be the end of his NFL career. He did not play well as a starter this year whatsoever, and then they proceed to bench him. So in summary, everything has gone wrong for the Colts this year, which means that someone has to take the blame, and that had to be Frank Reich. What surprises me is the fact that Jeff Saturday is the new interim head coach for the Colts. It's just an interim. They might decide to replace him with someone like Bieniemy or Leslie Frazier this offseason. But for now, Jeff Saturday, who has never coached in the NFL, wasn't even that good as a high school head coach, is a former NFL player for the Colts, who is good as a player, but that doesn't make him a good coach, is now the interim head coach. He wasn't even on the coaching staff, and yet he is the interim head coach. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. So it will be interesting to see how Jeff Saturday's coaching style changed the Colts. I think they'll get even worse, because now you just have a player that thinks they can coach NFL because they coached a bit of high school as your head coach. But it's possible that just all they needed was a change in the locker room, a change of voice, and now the Colts are going to start playing really well again. We'll have to see. What I feel bad for is Gus Bradley, because for the 3rd year straight, he has been the defensive coordinator for a defense that is really good, but the head coach ends up getting fired, so he ended up having to leave that offseason. First, it was Anthony Lynn with the Chargers. Anthony Lynn wasn't bad, but he kept losing close games, so the Chargers ended up deciding to fire him. The defense was really good on the Chargers that year, but they still just couldn't put it all together. So Gus Bradley ended up leaving and joining the divisional rival, the Raiders. And we all know what happened with John Gruden and the Raiders. So then, at that offseason, then he ended up leaving again and going to the Colts, where now Frank Reich was fired. So it makes sense that if Jeff Saturday does not become the long-term head coach, if they hire someone else, they'll probably bring in their own coaching staff, which will not include Gus Bradley, which means for another year, Gus Bradley, who has coached a stellar defense, will not be in the same team 2 years in a row. But we'll have to see. It's possible that Jeff Saturday does become the long-term head coach of the Colts, and maybe they start playing crazy well this season. Maybe they even win the division. I don't know. But for now, thank you guys for watching. Oh, and by the way, hope you guys like the new Sports with Dylan outro.